The man threw himself in front of the knife for her, and the alien woman will be indebted to him for the rest of her life. The marketplace of Caliph was never silent, but it carried the kind of noise that always felt like a threat. Voices overlapped in sharp tones, bargaining that sounded more like declarations of war, and footsteps clattered against the alloy ground, as if every person was walking toward someone they wanted to kill. Ethan moved through the crowd like someone who had already learned the trick of surviving in places like this. Walk fast, look like you belong, and don't stop long enough for anyone to measure how much you're worth. Of course, he didn't belong. His human features already marked him as an outsider, and the fact that he wasn't carrying half a dozen visible weapons probably made him look like prey. But he had a decent stride, and most predators liked an easy target. At least, that was the hope. He was watching the trade stalls, strange devices glowing with plasma cores, fruit that pulsed faintly as if alive, and one stand selling what looked suspiciously like live insects inside transparent cubes labeled snacks, when he noticed her. Elira. She walked differently than the others, her movements precise, as if she calculated her steps like equations. Her eyes shimmered with a color he couldn't name, sharp as molten crystal, and her ears, long, elegant, tapering to points, shifted slightly, tilting toward sound. Ethan blinked and muttered to himself, "So elves are real, just from outer space." He didn't expect her to hear, but she turned, as though the words had carried straight into her skull. Her gaze locked on him, unreadable, except for the faint narrowing of her eyes that seemed to say, "Keep talking, human, and see what happens." That was when it happened. A blur of movement broke from the crowd. A figure in ragged armor lunged at her, blade flashing in the pale light. No warning, no shouts, just pure violence slicing forward. Ethan didn't think. His body moved before his mind had time to argue. He shoved past the stall beside him, knocking over a box of wriggling snacks, and threw himself in front of her. The knife found him. It punched into his side with a shocking coldness, the pain not immediate but the wrongness of it undeniable. He grunted, staggered, but held his ground long enough for the attacker to be caught off balance. Elira reacted instantly, spinning, her hand snapping out with a motion too quick for him to follow. A small device discharged a burst of blue light, and the attacker collapsed, twitching. Ethan dropped to one knee, clutching his side. "Well," he wheezed. That was not in the brochure. Elira stared down at him. Her expression didn't change, but her ears twitched, flicking back as if in alarm. She knelt, her fingers hovering uncertainly near the wound. "You're a fool," she said, voice calm but sharp, like glass about to crack. "Yeah," Ethan managed, grimacing. "But I'm your fool, apparently." For a long second, silence hung between them, the marketplace watching but not daring to intervene. Then Elira slid an arm under his shoulder and hauled him upright, with surprising strength. He yelped, which earned him a sideways glance that might have been irritation, or maybe concern. They staggered together through the crowd. People parted before them, not out of kindness, but fear of Elira's glare. When they reached a narrow alley, she pressed him against the wall, pulled a small device from her belt, and activated it. A thin field shimmered around them, muting the outside noise. Ethan winced as she inspected the wound. "So, do you do this often? Pick up strange men who throw themselves on sharp objects for you?" Her lips tightened. "You ruined everything." "You're welcome," he said, though his voice cracked. "Wait, ruined what? Was this some kind of local tradition I just butchered?" "Sorry, pun not intended." Her hands moved fast, pulling a tube from her pack, spraying a sealant across the bleeding. It stung like fire, and he hissed, but she didn't pause. "You don't understand. No one here does what you did. Ever. Survival means you protect yourself first, always. You broke the law of Caliph." "Yeah, well," Ethan muttered, trying to breathe evenly. "Where I come from, throwing yourself in front of knives is considered chivalry. Or stupidity, depending on who you ask." Elira paused, her gaze lifting to meet his. Something flickered across her expression, something he couldn't name. "Both," she said finally. "It is both." He chuckled weakly. "Story of my life." The alley shimmered faintly with the field holding them in privacy. Outside, voices rose, rumors already weaving through the market. A human had defied the code. An alien woman had let him live. Nothing on Caliph would be the same after this. Elira pressed a final patch over his side, then stepped back, studying him as if she were examining a broken machine she wasn't sure could be fixed. You should have let me die. Ethan leaned his head back against the wall, smirking despite the pain. Sorry, not really my style. Her long ears tilted slightly forward, betraying the smallest shift of emotion. Then you've tied me to you. For the rest of your life. He blinked at her. Well, that's dramatic. Do I get a certificate? A membership card? Her expression didn't soften, but her eyes glimmered. You get me. And though Ethan had no idea what that meant, the way she said it made the wound at his side feel strangely less heavy. Ethan woke to the sound of something buzzing near his ear, a faint whine that made his skin crawl. He swatted weakly, only to smack his own face and groan. The pain in his side came rushing back, sharp and heavy, reminding him exactly why he should have minded his own business yesterday. You hit yourself. Elira's voice came from somewhere nearby, dry as dust. He opened one eye. She sat beside a console that hummed with faint blue light, wires curling like veins across the wall. The room was small, angular, built from the same alloy as the city outside, but much older. A forgotten medical station, maybe, left behind by whatever civilization had once bothered to care about keeping people alive. Reflex, he muttered. Thought there was a bug. There was. She pointed at the floor. A small metallic drone lay twitching, its tiny wings sparking. Ethan squinted. That's not a bug, that's a flying toaster with anger issues. It was scanning you, Elira said, leaning back in her chair. Old security unit. I disabled it. By glaring at it. By sending a pulse through its circuits. He sighed. Right. That was my second guess. She stood, moving to check the patch on his side. Her hands were quick, efficient, never lingering longer than necessary. You're healing. Slowly. Your species is fragile. Thanks, Ethan said, grimacing as she pressed the bandage. Great bedside manner. Do you insult all your patients, or just the stupid ones who save your life? All my patients are stupid. That's why they're patients. He chuckled, though it hurt. You'd make a fortune back home. Elira ignored him, finishing the inspection before returning to her console. We can't stay here long. The story of yesterday will already be spreading. There will be hunters. Hunters, Ethan repeated. Like bounty hunters? Or the regular kind that chase deer? Her head tilted slightly, ears angling back. What is a deer? Forget it. I'll assume it's the scary kind. Yes. He sat up carefully, feeling the pull in his side. So what happens now? You patch me up, dump me in an alley, and hope I don't bleed on your boots. Elira didn't look at him. You don't understand. You bound me. I was stabbed, not married, he said quickly. Her gaze cut toward him, sharp as a laser. On Caliph, when someone sacrifices themselves for another, it creates a life bond. I owe you until your death. He blinked. That sounds intense. Are there rules? Do I get to make requests? I serve until the debt is fulfilled. So, like a permanent subscription service. Do you come with updates? She didn't answer, though he caught the faintest twitch at the corner of her mouth. Maybe it was irritation. Maybe it was almost a smile. Hard to tell. Silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the machines. Finally, Ethan said, You don't strike me as the type who likes being tied to anyone. I don't, she replied. But I don't break my word. Not even when it chains me. He leaned back, watching her. Then maybe it doesn't have to feel like chains. Maybe it can just be company. Her ears twitched again, betraying thoughts she didn't put into words. Hours passed in uneasy peace. Elira scavenged through drawers, pulling out old tools and scanning devices. Ethan drifted in and out of shallow sleep, jolting awake whenever he snored loud enough to startle himself. At one point he asked if her ears picked up his snoring like radio signals, and she threatened to tape his mouth shut. By the time the artificial lights dimmed toward what must have been night, Elira had finished recalibrating a long, cylindrical device. She slung it across her back, checked the charge, and finally spoke. We move tomorrow. Ethan pushed himself upright. Move where? Somewhere less obvious. Less obvious than a glowing abandoned hospital filled with killer toasters? That's a tall order. She gave him a look, but it lacked the sharp edge of before. Sleep, human. You'll need the strength. He lay back down, staring at the ceiling, wondering how in all the galaxies he had managed to tangle himself into this. A hostile planet, an alien woman with ears like radio towers, and a blood debt that made no sense at all. But the way she had said "you get me" still echoed in his head, and despite the pain, despite the danger, despite everything, he didn't feel entirely sorry. In the quiet that followed, Ethan whispered to himself, "Yeah, this is definitely the worst vacation I've ever taken." From the corner of the room, a liar's voice floated softly, "Then you'll fit right in here." The desert stretched like a furnace, heat radiating from the fractured ground as Ethan stumbled after Elira. Every step jarred his side, though the sealant she'd used held well enough that he wasn't leaving a trail of blood like some grim breadcrumb path. His boots crunched against the cracked terrain, and he muttered, "If this is your idea of a less obvious hiding place, I'm starting to miss the killer toaster drones." Elira didn't look back. The desert is empty. That makes it safe. Empty deserts are never safe. That's like rule one of every bad movie ever made. First, you walk for hours, then something huge eats you. She glanced over her shoulder, ears flicking forward. "You think everything wants to eat you." He pointed at the ground. "The sand looks hungry. Don't tell me it isn't." Her mouth curved slightly, though she tried to hide it. "You talk too much. Talking is how I stay alive. Keeps me from focusing on how much my ribs feel like they're auditioning for percussion duty." Their path led them to the skeleton of an old transit line. Towering pylons rose in jagged intervals, their cables long since snapped, some still sparking faintly with leftover charge. Ethan paused under one, staring upward. "You people built sky trains?" "Not people," Elira corrected, running a hand along the corroded metal. "Machines built by the ancients. My world forgot how long ago. We repurpose what we can. The rest rots." Great tourism slogan. Visit Caliph. We don't know how any of this stuff works. She tilted her head toward him, expression flat. "You survived a stabbing. That doesn't mean I won't leave you behind." He grinned. "You wouldn't. Bond and all that. I'm basically your favorite responsibility now." She muttered something in her language, a word that sounded sharp enough to cut glass. Ethan decided it was either beloved partner or idiot who won't shut up. He chose to believe the first. As night fell, the desert transformed. The heat faded, replaced by a cold sharp enough to sting his teeth, and the sky opened into a sprawl of stars brighter than any he'd seen back on Earth. Then the ground began to glow. At first, he thought it was a trick of his eyes. But no, the cracks in the earth pulsed with a soft blue luminescence, as though something alive ran beneath the surface. Streams of light spread in branching lines, glowing brighter as they walked. Ethan stopped. "Okay, I take back my complaints. This is wow." Elira didn't slow. "Energy veins. Old power lines buried deep. They leak." "Leak? That sounds safe. Very eco-friendly. It keeps predators away." He looked around quickly. "Predators? You're just now telling me there are predators." She finally glanced back at him, and for a moment her expression softened. "Relax, human. You smell like pain and medicine. Nothing would eat you." He laughed despite the ache. "Thanks. Real confidence booster." By dawn, they reached a canyon carved deep into the earth, its walls shimmering faintly with crystalline growths. Elira led him down a narrow path until they reached a cavern opening. Inside, the air was cooler, the floor scattered with glowing moss that gave off faint warmth. Ethan collapsed onto a stone ledge. Finally, a place without people trying to stab us. Elira crouched beside a console half buried in the wall. With careful fingers, she activated it, coaxing a faint hum of energy. The moss lit brighter, as if connected to her efforts. He watched her work, fascinated despite exhaustion. "So, you really are some kind of engineer, huh? All wires and switches." She didn't glance up. "I was. What happened? Or is that a story that ends with me regretting I asked?" Her hands paused, then resumed moving. "I tried to build a bridge. between tribes, between enemies. No one wanted it. They called me traitor. Ethan whistled softly. Back home, we just argue about taxes. You're on a whole other level. You're still bleeding, she said abruptly, as if to cut the topic short. She crossed to him with a vial of shimmering liquid. Drink. He eyed it warily. That doesn't look FDA approved. It will accelerate your healing. And if it doesn't, then you die faster. He sighed, tipped it back, and gagged. Tastes like if cough syrup had a baby with motor oil. Good. That means it works. He wiped his mouth, glaring. You people really need better chefs. She sat across from him, watching as the glow from the moss painted their faces in pale blue. Silence hung for a while before Ethan spoke again. So this bond thing. When you said forever, how literal is that? Because I snore, and I'd hate for you to regret your vow halfway through the night. Elira's ears twitched, and for the first time, she laughed. It was short, quiet, but unmistakable. You already test my patience. Forever will be long. Ethan grinned, ignoring the pain in his ribs. Then I guess I'll just have to make it entertaining. And though the canyon outside hummed faintly with unseen dangers, inside the cavern the air felt lighter, warmed not only by the moss, but by the smallest sound of her laughter lingering between them. Ethan had thought the canyon cave was safe. A glowing moss floor, humming consoles, and the faint sound of Elira laughing, it felt almost cozy, like a strange alien bed and breakfast with a chance of death. But comfort never lasted long on Caliph. By the third day, the sound of engines echoed faintly through the canyon walls, and Elira froze mid-step. They found us, she whispered. Ethan sighed, leaning back against the stone. Of course they did. I was just starting to think about breakfast. Do alien moss pancakes exist? Her ears angled back, sharp with focus. Hunters. They track whispers. He blinked. Whispers. Like gossip. Like stories. What happened in the market spreads fast. Now they come to claim you. Or me. Or both. Ethan pushed himself up, wincing as his side twinged. Great. So what's the plan? Please tell me it's not. We run and hope they're slower than us. I can barely keep up with you on flat ground. Elira's hands moved quickly over the old console, drawing energy into a cylindrical device that thrummed with a rising hum. She slung it over her shoulder. We don't run. We disrupt. That word sounds suspiciously like explode. She didn't deny it. By the time the hunter ships descended, the canyon was alive with vibrations. Sleek craft slid overhead, their hulls marked with tribal insignias, their undercarriages glowing with thrusters. Ethan squinted up. I'll be honest, those look way too advanced for bounty hunters. Back home, our repo guys just have trucks. Caliph rewards strength, Elira said. They'll bring everything they have. She activated the device. A pulse rippled outward, invisible but heavy, making Ethan's teeth buzz. The ships above staggered midair, their lights flickering. One spiraled, nearly colliding with the canyon wall before stabilizing. Ethan grinned despite the danger. Okay, I admit that was awesome. You just EMP'd them with a glowing stick. Can I get one? No. You'd misuse it. You say that like it's a bad thing. The hunters disembarked, armored figures with helmets shaped to exaggerate snarling faces. Their weapons glowed with plasma edges. One shouted something in Calithian, the words harsh and guttural. Elira didn't respond. Instead, she stepped forward, weapon steady. Ethan muttered, I don't suppose diplomacy is on the table? Elira tilted her head toward him. You think you could talk them down? I've got jokes. Maybe they like comedy. Then die laughing. The fight began with a blinding flash. Plasma bolts tore through the canyon, scorching stone. Elira moved like flowing light, dodging, firing bursts from her weapon that crackled against hunter shields. Ethan dove behind a boulder, yelling, I thought you said this was a safe canyon. She shouted back, I said it was empty. Big difference. A hunter lunged at him, blade raised. Instinct screamed, but before Ethan could move, Elira's shot caught the attacker in the chest, sending them sprawling. She didn't look at him, didn't break stride, just kept fighting. Ethan scrambled to his feet, heart pounding. He grabbed a rock, because apparently that was his contribution to a high-tech battlefield, and hurled it at a hunter. It bounced off harmlessly. Okay, noted. Rocks are not plasma-resistant. One of the hunters barked a command, and suddenly their formation shifted, pressing Elira into a corner of the canyon wall. Ethan saw it happening, saw the trap closing, and before he could second-guess, he shouted, "Hey, over here!" Every helmet turned. He regretted it immediately. Plasma bolts scorched the ground around him as he ran, weaving clumsily, ribs screaming in protest. Terrible plan, he gasped. But it worked. Their focus split, and Elira seized the opening. Her weapon released a concentrated blast that sent a shockwave ripping through the canyon. Dust and light swallowed everything. When it cleared, the hunters lay scattered, their weapons sparking, their ships disabled. Ethan collapsed to his knees, panting. "I think I'm allergic to heroics. My lungs are filing complaints." Elira approached, lowering her weapon, her ears angled toward him, her expression unreadable. "You're insane." He managed a grin, and yet effective. She studied him for a long moment before saying, "You keep choosing danger, even when you could hide." "Yeah," he said softly, catching his breath. "Guess I'm bad at survival rules." Something flickered in her eyes, something she didn't voice. Instead, she turned away, scanning the canyon. "More will come. We have to move." Ethan groaned, dragging himself upright. "I swear, every time I start to relax, someone tries to kill us. Is this, like, a Calithian tradition?" Stabbed the visitor weak. Her ears twitched. "It's daily. Wonderful. Can't wait for tomorrow's festivities." Together they moved deeper into the canyon, leaving wrecked ships and unconscious hunters behind. For a fleeting moment, Ethan allowed himself to feel proud. He had survived another day on a planet that wanted him dead. And not just survived, he'd made her laugh, made her look at him differently, even if only for a second. But somewhere in the shadows, whispers were spreading louder. The human who bled for the alien who stood beside him. And Caliph itself was listening. The citadel of shards rose like a knife against the horizon, its spire gleaming with fractured glass and metal. Ethan stared up at it, hands on his knees, wheezing. "You know," he said, gasping, "for a planet obsessed with stabbing things, building a giant knife as your government headquarters feels a little on the nose." Elira stood beside him, weapon slung across her back, ears sharp with focus. "The rulers gather here. If we want to end this, we face them now." He squinted at the towering structure. "End this? I was kinda hoping for a nice, hide-in-a-cave forever plan. I'm good at caves. I'm less good at facing space dictators." She glanced at him. "You've already defied them. The story spreads across Caliph. If we run, the story dies. If we fight, the story grows." He groaned. "Right. So no pressure. Just my suicidal heroics, inspiring cultural revolution. Totally casual." Inside, the citadel pulsed with light, crystalline walls humming like living things. Rulers in tall, shimmering armor stood before them, voices echoing across the chamber. "You brought weakness to Caliph," one declared. "The human chose death for another. Such corruption cannot live here." Ethan leaned toward Elira and whispered, "I'm not sure if that was supposed to be an insult, but I feel oddly flattered." Elira stepped forward. "You call it weakness. I call it strength. He chose connection over fear. He bled for another when no one else would. That is what Caliph has forgotten." The ruler's laughter rang cold. "Compassion is rot. Bonds are chains." Ethan cleared his throat, raising a shaky hand. "Not to interrupt your evil monologue, but if compassion is rot, then I guess I'm the moldiest guy in the room. And for the record, chains aren't so bad when you like the person you're tied to." Elira's ears flicked, and for a second, her gaze softened toward him. The rulers commanded their enforcers forward, towering biomechanical guardians, their limbs crackling with energy. Ethan's eyes widened. "Oh good, giant murder robots. Just what I needed today." Because regular-sized hunters weren't traumatic enough. Elira powered up her weapon, the hum filling the chamber. "We fight together." Ethan picked up a discarded staff lying near the floor. It buzzed faintly in his hands, activating. He grinned despite the fear. Look at me. Finally getting a sci-fi weapon. Mom would be proud. The battle crashed through the chamber, light and sound colliding. Enforcers swung with deadly precision, their blades slicing the air, but Elira's shots tore through their shields, while Ethan ducked and swung clumsily, knocking one into a crystal wall. Sparks erupted. "Did you see that?" he shouted. "I actually did something useful." "Focus," she barked, but there was laughter in her voice, quick and sharp. Together they fought, until the last enforcer collapsed, sparks fading. The ruler staggered back, armor dimming. Elira raised her weapon, but instead of firing, she lowered it. Her voice carried through the hall. "This ends now. Caliph will not be ruled by fear, but by choice." The chamber's crystals amplified her words, sending them echoing beyond the citadel. Outside, the people heard. Whispers became shouts, shouts became a roar, and the old laws cracked like shattered glass. The rulers fled, their power broken. The citadel's lights dimmed, no longer thrumming with command. Silence settled. Ethan slumped against a wall, breathing hard. "Well, we didn't die. That's new. Usually we almost die. I call that progress." Elira approached him slowly. Her eyes lingered on him, softer than he had ever seen them. "You changed everything. Not just Caliph. Me." He smirked, though his voice was rough. "You know, when I jumped in front of that knife, I didn't exactly have a 5-year plan. I just thought you shouldn't die that day." Her ears angled forward, tender in their tilt. "And now your life is bound to mine." "Yeah," he said, pushing himself upright. "And I'm okay with that. Because maybe forever doesn't have to feel like a chain. Maybe it just means we don't have to walk alone anymore." For the first time, Elira smiled fully, without restraint. "Forever, then." "Forever," Ethan echoed, grinning. "Though fair warning, I snore." Loudly. Her laugh echoed through the broken chamber, lighter than any sound that place had ever held. Outside, Caliph shifted, its people gathering under a new story, of a human who bled, of an alien who chose, of a bond stronger than fear. And for the first time, the horizon didn't feel like a wall of knives, but an open path. Ethan looked at it, then at her, and said, "So, what do we do now?" Elira's ears twitched playfully. "We start over." He nodded. "Good. Because honestly, I'm terrible at endings." And together, they stepped out into a world no longer bound by silence, carrying laughter, scars, and something unbreakable between them. The end.